We've got a special one today. Joining me now is Pennsylvania's Lieutenant Governor John Fetterman and his wife Giselle. Thank you both for taking the time to come on.
Thanks for having us. Thanks for letting me crash.
Yeah, of course.
The running joke, and it's not even a joke, is she's everyone's favorite. So I'm actually the one that's crashing it, I think.
Yeah. Just coasting on her coattails right there.
Yeah, exactly. No, I mean, like, I'm just the arm candy, and I'm okay with that. But no, yeah, thanks for having us back, really. So.
Of course. Well, John, I know that you have something that you'd like to say, so I don't want to waste any time. Floor is yours.
Hey, well, thank you. I'm honored to be announcing that I'm running for the United States Senate here in Pennsylvania. And it's not a decision that, my family and I arrived at easily. It's going to be a really big race. But, when we announced a couple of weeks ago that we were expressing an interest and we were exploring this, we had no idea the kind of response that we were going to get. We're closing in on $1.5 million in a little over 3 weeks. About 37,000 grassroots donors, and all 50 states, every one of Pennsylvania's 67 counties, and thank you, thanks everyone that has supported us, has reached out, has bought a shirt, has donated, has encouraged us. You deserve thanks, but you also deserve an answer, and today, we have that answer, and I'm just honored to join the race.
Giselle, you and John have been married since 2008, so your relationship has always been on the campaign trail in some form, from mayor of Braddock when you guys met all the way up until 2018 for the lieutenant governor race. Is it a good experience being on the campaign trail?
Mostly, yes. I mean, you meet incredible people. For me, politics is hard because I'm sensitive, and I think politics can be mean. But we need people to change that, right? So I can't say, oh, politics is mean, don't run. I have to say, politics is mean, and you have to go and change that. So I'm, a huge supporter of his, even though I don't like to admit in front of him.
It's true. And also, and with Giselle here, it's one of the things that one of the reasons why I ran is immigration. Giselle's family origin story, came, she lived for many years. She was brought here to this country when she was 7, her family fleeing a dangerous situation, violent situation in her home country of Brazil. And, her story and her contribution subsequently, and her family's contribution to this country has just reaffirmed to me that immigration makes America, America. And, it really just, I can't imagine anyone turning their back on America's origin story with immigration. And, Giselle is a huge part of that partnership here, and just all these other issues that we're running on. And what really crystallized it for me was these last 2.5, 3 months where our country was under siege. And, I was called on to defend the electoral integrity of my Commonwealth. And this idea that there was widespread fraud, that there was this conspiracy to deliver Pennsylvania to Joe Biden, how outrageous that is. 4 votes, four fraudulent votes, all for dead relatives, all voting for President Trump in Pennsylvania out of nearly 7 million ballots, and how close we came to having it devolve completely into chaos, and actually was chaos in January 6th down in the Capitol. So it all just, it's early perhaps to be in this cycle, but there's just so much going on and the stakes are so high. And we just decided now is the right time, especially after the great encouragement and feedback that we received.
So I know that you spoke about the issues of immigration and obviously, restoring a lot of the sanity that we've lost over the last few years. But what are the other issues that your campaign is going to focus on?
I've been in Braddock now for 20 years. I came to Braddock in 2001, and you try to think of what the Democratic Party was like in 2001. We were just a few short years after the infamous crime bill. We had just ended welfare as we know it as a party a few years earlier. And I came to Braddock to work in as marginalized a community that certainly exists in Pennsylvania, and to rebuild and to try to confront this raging inequality, at least that I saw here in this country, and that it was a threat to the country that I love. And for the last 20 years, I've fought for living wages. I fought that healthcare is a fundamental human right. I fought for environmental justice. I fought for community policing. I fought for LGBTQIA protections. I officiated the first same-sex wedding in Pennsylvania, even under threat of legal sanction when it was still illegal. And as crazy as it sounds, that it was illegal to wed two people of the same gender.
Yeah. We did it in our home, and I have a great memory from that. Our oldest, Carl, would have been, how old was Carl?
Carl would have been, 2013, so Carl would have been 5.
And, John performs a lot of weddings as mayor. Yeah. He has. And so I said, Carl, today's a really important wedding. And he's like, Daddy marries people all the time. Like, what's the big deal? And I said, well, today it's 2 boys. And he was like, and he walked off. And it was such a simple, beautiful response that I think we're missing from so many people.
Yeah, totally.
In conversation.
Yeah, and also I alluded to earlier, immigration, environmental justice, climate change. We live across the street from the last steel mill in the region. Finding a balance between jobs and the industries that we have, but also acknowledging that we have to transition away from the fossil fuel industry as well too, and transition to green energy. And we can create millions of jobs, union jobs, with the green energy revolution, while respecting and honoring the transition that it's going to take for us to get there in the meantime, and not leave anyone behind, and not throw any workers to the wolves and say, hey, you can learn how to code, or you can go work at Google or something. So it's really just this whole litany of issues that I've been running on for the last 20 years. And I think that level of consistency is where the Democratic Party has evolved to, as opposed to where we came from some 20 years ago when I came here to Braddock.
And I know a big issue for you specifically is the legalization of marijuana. I know that Pennsylvania Republicans passed a law banning the flying of the pro-legalization flag, and you have promised to replace the flag if anyone takes it down. But John, you're 6'8". Yeah. Who is going to go onto your balcony and take down your flag? Like, if you came up to me and you decided to take my car keys, that car would be yours.
Let me be clear. I would never, I love you. I would never take your car keys or anyone's car keys. But it's really the poor state employees that are caught in the middle of it. The Republicans wrote the law, and they said, well, hey, are you gonna, you got to enforce the law? And they're like, okay, we're sorry. And then they took my flags down, they fold them nicely, and they put them away. And then I'm like, I put them back out again. And then the Republicans are like, hey, they're back out again. So, put this in perspective. The Republicans gave Representative Green a standing ovation. After, Jewish space lasers and all kinds of crazy, awful things. But the Republicans in my state passed a law literally banning me from flying a weed flag and pride flags on my personal office balcony to affirm my support for these issues. It's the party's dysfunctional in that regard. And these are two things that are fundamentally, I believe, just equal protection under the law for that community, as well as ending a big part of the racist drug war in this country, not to mention billions in revenue. And I'm proud to say, when I ran first time statewide in the 2015-16 cycle, I was the only candidate running for national office that was for 100% legalization, the only one at that time. So that's this kind of part of the issues that I'm proud to say that I feel like we're on the right side of history. And we, and I'm also the only candidate that may theoretically get into the race here in Pennsylvania that has also won and run statewide too, as well, as because we all know what an important race this is going to be for control of the Senate.
But also, how shocked was I to know that they could pass a law that quickly, right? There's so many things they could pass a law on.
Yeah, it almost makes you think that if their priorities were in order, we actually might have a functional government.
It's amazing.
You think of the world we could build if they passed the law fast enough to get rid of my marijuana and pride flags, for that. That's a great point.
That is a really, really good point. So I know that people like to put candidates in boxes, moderate, progressive. How would you describe yourself?
Large. That's about it. I honestly, I don't put myself in any box. I fundamentally believe that I'm running on what I believe I know to be true, as I mentioned, these past 20 years. And if somebody wants to say, well, I think that's progressive, or I think that's moderate, or I think, I've never been called conservative, but my point though is that I think these are universal things. I mean, mathematically, no one can live off $7.25 an hour.
Right.
We all know that every human being is going to require healthcare in his or her lifetime. It's a fact. Not to mention to live a quality life, let alone to save your life. And why do we pretend that that's not a fundamental human right? Why do we pretend that we don't have raging inequality, in communities like my own compared to other communities as well too? We acknowledge that we had a crisis in our policing. We have environmental crises and issues with climate change. We have immigration. We have all these different issues, and I believe those are fundamental truths. And if that's progressive, if that's whatever, some people think I'm an establishment because I'm already like the lieutenant governor, and I'm like, I don't consider myself establishment. I just feel like I'm just running on these issues regardless of what the platform is.
I'd put him in a cute box.
Oh, that's that's just plain. See, like that's that.
That's the clip that's going up.
Yeah, no, I don't.
This whole interview, the only clip that's going up is that one.
That was kind of like, but at any rate, yeah. I mean, I don't like to be put in a box. I don't put other people in a box. But I just put that out there that Republicans, let's say, should acknowledge that who can live off $7.25 an hour. Like I don't see why like paying someone a living wage is. Like Florida has lapped Pennsylvania in that department. So it's I don't know why that's considered progressive to say mathematically you can't even get to first base in terms of self-sufficiency if you're making $7.25 an hour.
It's compassionate legislation. I mean,
erring on the side of compassion. I don't feel like that's a progressive value, although increasingly it more seems that way. But I'm always would want to err on the side of compassion, whether it's immigration, whether it's wages, whether it's, you name it.
And by the way, that there's no reason why that should even be, to your point, why that should be a democratic value. I don't think anybody in on the conservative side of the aisle would ever say like, oh, we strive to not be compassionate. Yeah. We strive to not care about people,
They just do it naturally.
Yeah.
Well, John, to your point, you'd mentioned your size. What do you say to people who've noticed that you won't exactly look like the typical Democrat in the Senate?
Yeah, I mean, much has been made of the fact that I don't like to necessarily. I'm not sharp dressed like you. I'm just kind of like who I am. And my response after the last month is, I promise if I'm elected to be your next senator to be 100% sedition free. I'm not going to be worried about what I wear or my, and I'm not going to get up on the floor of the Senate and claim that Pennsylvania ran a rigged election. I'm not going to, even after I'm driven out of the very chamber I'm a member of by my own supporters that I've helped incite to say these terrible things and exchange political capital in the moment, at least what you perceive as your own political capital, to damage the very fabric of our nation and to damage, almost destroy the peaceful transition of power. So I would hope that people would find that most distasteful and, my atypical appearance, whatever you want to call it, less jarring. Like I said, 100%.
Well, before, we'd go out and people would recognize him more now. But for years, everyone thought he was my bodyguard. Like I would be at the mall, I'd be anywhere and people would say, who are you? And I'm like, nobody. Why? And they're like, why is there a bodyguard walking by? I'm like, oh.
To your point, though, I mean, if anyone out there is looking for a bodyguard and John Fetterman showed up, I think that would be a well placed investment.
Well, if anyone finds me unorthodox, one thing I can promise you is I will be 100% sedition free if as a United States senator, which unfortunately we can't say that these days.
Speaking of that issue, we do have Trump's Senate trial coming up now. The likelihood of 17 Republican senators defecting and holding Trump accountable is unlikely. So what would be your message to them?
I'd say, look, while you're clutching your pearls and talking about how this is that or that, it's like, remember, your party impeached President Clinton over an improper relationship with an intern, and you seem to have no qualms about doing that. Your guy incited a riot that resulted in the deaths of brave Capitol Police officers and nearly could have gone much worse than it did. Why have the whole process of impeachment on the books if this doesn't apply to it? And, everyone knows that it's dead on arrival. But this idea that a party, some 20 years ago can vote to impeach someone over an improper relationship, and then now can say, well, what's a little sedition among friends? It's just part of the magic of today's GOP, the magical thinking.
Really well said. So I want to jump back into Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania largely swung to the left throughout the entire state from 2016 to 2020, but there were a number of counties in western Pennsylvania, Clarion, Indiana, Clearfield, and southern Pennsylvania, like Greene, Fayette, Bedford, Fulton, where Republicans actually gained ground. And that was during a pandemic, during an economic recession, during a jobs crisis. And by the way, in Philadelphia too, Republicans gained a few percentage points.
They did.
So how do you make up that ground? How do you get those voters who, even amid such a terrible backdrop, went to the right? How do you get them to come back to your campaign?
Well, I keep returning back to that theme of like, I'm just going to run on what I know to believe is true. I would also point out that when the governor and I ran together in 2018, we actually won Pennsylvania by 852,000 votes. That was a swing of 900,000 votes between 16 and 18. So I think there's a lot of people that are reachable. Now, without a doubt, Donald Trump is a unique individual with a cult-like following. That's undeniable. But I also don't think that there's another Republican that can assume that mantle and generate that kind of devotion either. We saw that in our race with a wannabe, kind of Trump-like version, and it was a crash and burn. But I can't change what I believe and what I know to be true. And I've already, I'm the most progressive candidate that's won and run across Pennsylvania statewide. And I never had to compromise what I believe in. I never had to compromise my principles. And I've said this on the campaign trail. If you think, you should be excluded from first, equal protection under the law because of who you love or how you identify, don't vote for me,
Yeah. But I think authenticity, like we have a ton of Republicans that will write and say, I don't agree with you on anything, but I believe you. So I support you. Right. So I think the authenticity is what people have been craving for so long, and that's enough to cross an aisle. And
I believe there are enough reachable ones. I mean, I'm not talking like 70 or 80% of Republicans. I'm talking, there isn't enough of them. But I'm also principled where it's like, if you believe that immigrants, like my wife's family when she came to this country, should be treated like like they're just demagogued and locked in cages. I mean, my wife, when she was brought to this country at 7 years old, could have been locked in a cage under the kind of regime that we had the last 4 years. If you think that's what America is about, vote for the other person. It's not going to be me. But I think enough people, a majority of people, would reject that kind of way of thinking. And that's the kind of campaign that I'm going to run on. And I don't feel like I have some manifest destiny that this seats, I'm entitled to anything. I am going to run on what I believe to be true, and my record will show that. And to Giselle's point about having bipartisan support, I think there are enough people that respect that. And also, weed is a very bipartisan thing too. Libertarians, fiercely supportive of legal weed, and a lot of Republicans are too. And I really believe that there are a lot of issues. It's not urban versus rural, it's urban and rural. And there is more, facts that unite these places than not. And that's what I plan on reminding people. Our campaign slogan, our core value is every county, every vote. Whether it's a 5,000 little Cameron County, Person County, or one of the biggest cities, in the country, like Philadelphia.
I want to switch gears here to your personal life. I'm fascinated by where you live. It's a renovated 1920s former car dealership. Whose idea was that? How'd that come about?
The space became available. We kind of, I think, walked in, we're like, this is home.
Yeah.
I think it came at the same time.
It's there's pictures online. It's such a beautiful building, and we hope that it would be a metaphor for abandoned and forgotten communities, where you can take this building that was almost assuredly going to fall into abandonment and eventually be razed, and turn it into, I think, an example of the possibility if investments are made and flags are planted. And, we had this amazing restaurant downstairs, Superior Motors, named after the dealership, which prior to the pandemic closing it, national awards, national recognition. Anthony Bourdain shot one of his final episodes there before he tragically took his life. We have a black box theater in the rear of the building too. So it's a really special place.
And I think we're trying to challenge perspective. My view out the window is the mill, and people will say, I would never want to live across from a mill. But for me, I love, I look at that mill, I think of all the immigrants who built that mill, who died in that mill, and the stories and the lives they gave. And it's like my personal tea light, because there's this huge flame that comes out at night. So I think it's challenging perspectives. Our kids can ride their bikes or rollerblade in the house, and because it's an old car dealership. So I think it's pushing that idea that this place mattered, as well as did our community, as well as do people, and not leaving anybody behind.
That's a really, really great answer. Well, I do have one more question, and this is going back to the campaign, and this is an issue that has kind of followed you, John. There's one more subset of people that you have to work to reach, and it probably won't be an easy subset, and that is the Wawa voter. For those who don't know, Wawa is a convenience store. It's mostly found in the tri-state area that people.
You had to go there, man.
Well, it's a convenience store that people in the tri-state area, like myself, who grew up in New Jersey, have an unhealthy obsession with. Kind of like how Californians love In-N-Out, New Englanders love their Dunkin' Donuts.
They do love Dunkin'.
Fox News hosts, they love fear-mongering about immigrants. So everybody has their thing, right? John is a pretty avowed Sheetz guy. So how do you plan on bridging the gap?
By being honest, Brian, and I want to be clear, I've never badmouthed Wawa. Wawas are great if you're 50 miles or more from a Sheetz. That's really a good rule of thumb how I operate when I'm on the road.
I think I'm the diplomat here, because I lived in New Jersey too, and I love me some Wawa as well. So we can come.
You could have told me this before we got married.
We can come to the table together and find peace.
Well, I don't agree with that. I'm a Steelers guy, and
she gave a perfect answer. She gives a perfect answer, and the first thing John says is, "I don't agree with that."
Yeah, and I hope that Wawa, Team Wawa, wouldn't hold it against me that I'm duty bound to be honest about the truth of Sheetz being better than Wawa. I would hope that they would respect me for telling the truth, not my truth, but the truth. But yeah, I think we can come together. We can agree to disagree on Sheetz and Wawa.
There you go. We'll leave it there. So John and Giselle, thank you so much for taking the time, and best of luck on the campaign trail.
Thanks for having us on, really, honestly.